Alessio is a jury member. Welcome to Alessio Erioli. Alessio is a jury member of RESHAPE 15 wearable technology competition. And it's a pleasure for us to have you here, Alessio. So welcome to RESHAPE. And thank you
very much, Aldo.
Thank you to you. So let's start. Let's start with the questions. Nowadays, biology is one of the most important sources of inspiration for architecture and engineering, especially for concepts like evolution or adaptation. Which are the benefits that biology can offer to fashion design? Is it a source of inspiration in your work as well?
Yeah, I have to say that biology is a very important lens through which I see things, and it's a beautiful source of role models that give access to a certain degree of complexity. But I understand more generally ecology as a system of relation in general. Therefore, I do not limit myself to biology only. Anything, if understood in ecological terms, can be a source of inspiration. Biology is one realm, but not the main one or not the only one for such a thing. Also, it's interesting to see, from my perspective, how many people talk about evolution within biology, but do not conceive the fact that evolution itself, or its concept, definition, and processes evolves, and that biology can evolve out of itself as well, or even the evolution itself is a concept that is in constant evolution through history, which sounds kind of self-referential, but as being let's say, the concept itself, a product of the culture, it evolves with the evolution of the culture. On one side, biology is a handbook for me for complex harmony in terms of both morphology and organization in terms of processes, and also I look at it as a source of monstrosity, which means I like to poke fun at those people who sings in ecstasy about nature and biology as a source of aesthetic perfection, like those guys who say nature is good, civilization is bad, and I like to poke fun at this with tons of examples in which biology looks totally screwed up and produces this sort of monster. But on the side, monstrosity, it's a very fascinating thing, because things work as well. They are not the only way of, let's say, solving life problems, of life issues, just through something that looks beautiful to us. There are a lot of options, and something that is totally alien to our, let's say, common sense of aesthetics. It can be an interesting source of studies and of inspiration to step out, let's say, of the average or of the usual, let's say, routine of things. And it is very important when you look at it in terms of fashion design to take inspiration and also to be able to read into those things something that is more, or can be translated into something more than just what it's in front of our eyes. So I was saying, for me, it's mostly a source for sophistication and complexity. How that can contribute truly to fashion design, it is more a matter of designer sensibility, and how it is successfully channeled. That sensibility is successfully channeled into the realm of aesthetics.
Okay. Wow, you introduced the concept of monstrosity. It's very interesting, eh? And it will be interesting also to go deeper with this concept.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, I mean, it's you know, another one of the jury members of RESHAPE, Nicolo Casas, as well, about a new form of aesthetic that is not based on beauty as it was conceived in the 90s, you know. So I feel interesting connection between these two visions. Anyways, Ale, let's go on. The use of technology.
Just one thing before you go on.
Tell me.
I'm very well aware of what Nicolas says about it. We had a lot of wonderful conversations about the argument, so it might be not just by coincidence that the argument came out.
Very good, very good. So, second question. The use of technology often leads to a linear process where optimization becomes a reason for moral and cultural validation. How design can escape from this misunderstanding, turning technology into something else than a tool which optimizes the process?
Okay, these, in my mind, are actually two questions in one. One about optimization trend as a cultural validation, and one about technology and creativity in processes. It's not a problem. I'm going to answer both in this order or connect the answer at some point. Just the premise, it's interesting how much misunderstanding there is when, as you say in these two questions, on one side, architecture and engineering are looking at biology and yet comprehend so little about it, mostly copycatting experiments done by somebody else without understanding the underlying larger scope or philosophy. And on the other side, they're using general optimization and linear processes, which is a further symptom of this misunderstanding, when truly nature is all the opposite of general optimization and linear processes. All too often, there is this reduction to linear indexical relation between cause and effect, which is the same issue, I would say, with a lot of results that are published on the web, something that I would put under the label of poor parametrics, let's say. Well, in reality, it's very different. Optimization processes are at work there, but their consequences are nonlinear and not predictable in advance. They tend always towards complexity and obfuscation of roles, which means in a complex system, it's very difficult to say who does what, or if some task is performed by exactly that part instead of being the contribution of larger number of multifunctional parts that are not only contributing to that function, but multiple other functions. So it's not that everything does everything, but rather there is a multiplicity of roles for the parts in the complex systems that perform multiplicity of tasks at the time. And this tendency toward complexity and obfuscation of roles, it's the usual trend in complex systems and in reality, because reality is complex, rather than this ideal reductionist clarification when you have to optimize something. General optimization is a very useful tool when you have to deal with engineering problems, something that you can frame very precisely, and it requires a very precise definition of the context, of the constraints. You have to fence the problem very clearly and be sure that you have one only solution in that realm. Then you can use general optimization for some problems. It's the same issues with genetic algorithms. They are search algorithms, but you have to make sure that the search realm admits only one solution, and that solution is the best in that realm. The confusion comes when you extend this as a general way of thinking, so that you think in terms of the optimum, which is something that we still have in many, let's say, arguments that I see in papers and online and in discussions. But it's just, let's say, something that we should get rid of, because it ended up when we stepped out of modernity. Modernity was based on the ideal, but we should be well beyond that. About technology. Well, technology, in my mind, is not just a tool. It is a medium and a force we must reckon, as we are symbiotic to it. We cannot live without technology. We are system builders by nature, I would say, enthusiast makers of technology. No matter how low-tech we can consider it, is still technology. Language is a technology. And the second thing about technology, it only blossoms to, or it can blossom only to full potential, only when it's understood as something precisely it's something more than just a tool, and when we accept the way that it rewires our mind. In terms of optimization, going back to the first part of the question, I had a very nice conversation with Eric Goldenberg when I had the chance to host him for a lecture here in Bologna, and he was using the word optimizing in a very interesting way. It was during, let's say, the design process, and he intended optimization as a clarification of the discourse you're doing. At some point, when you start from even fuzzy ideas, at some point you have to be rigorous in your proceedings to build up a coherent process. And the more you can clarify your discourse, the more you can optimize it in that sense, like the way, let's say, somebody that does the inks on the pencils for a comic book should clarify the thousands of lines drawn in pencil with a single stroke of ink. So at some point you have to do this sort of clarification, but not to put constraints on your objectives, but to put coherence in the way you proceed. So it is a very interesting way of seeing optimization in my in a creative process in general. And Eric found a very clear way of explaining what happens at some point in a creative process, whether it is through computation or it's through traditional means, let's say. It has also the issue of optimization and technology. They both have a connection with the notion of performance. Performance not just or not mainly intended as an act, but intended as a measure, as an objective measure, let's say, of an effect or of a process, of the result of a process. Whenever I teach and I explain to students, or I speak about performance in conferences, I always put two different let's say, contexts in which you can understand performance. One, it's related to problem solving, when you have a precise goal to pursue. Then you have the problem that is very clearly framed, and you have to orient it towards that precise goal. Then performance is very clear. Means very clear what you have to do. You can speak about objective performance because you are running for a predefined goal, and then you have let's say, an external system of measurement that you can relate to. So that external system becomes the absolute system in that case, because you know you have to deal with that. In the other case, there is performance oriented to creativity and open-ended processes, which is when you have to deal with creative processes. To put the same on the same ground these two views of performance, I use a metaphor which is a metaphor based on snow. So you have the speed skier on one side that has to go down a slope as fast as possible for 1 kilometer. And that is the reductive performance realm. You have a very precise problem. It's more a matter of engineering. You have to go faster than your predecessors, and there's not much more about it as a goal, but there's a lot going on in terms of posture, in terms of material, in terms of gear, in terms of a lot of other things. On the other side, there's a snowboarder going down the half pipe. So what is the goal? The goal is to impress the jury, but there's no objective way of impressing the jury. There are several tricks, but you can always invent new tricks. And the snowboarder has its own gear, and it speaks about snowboarders or musicians. They always speaks about the performance of the gear, but there's not an objective performance. It's a very subjective idea of performance, and the goal of this, the goal why you improve with this subjective idea in mind, the performance of your gear, is to open up a realm of opportunities in terms of expression. So a snowboarder might want a faster board in order to gain speed, to have more rotation, so he can perform a new trick. or more height, or more drag, or any other thing that is related to, let's say, a measurable quantity in terms of material performance or force or physical parameters, but it is used in an open-ended way, which means, as I was saying, when you sum up all the effects, what you get is something that is not predictable. It goes in the realm of non-linearity. So optimization can be seen as opportunity-oriented or problem-solving oriented.
Very interesting. You know, basically, probably we are also shifting, talking about optimization, from designing objects to designing systems that are able to be optimized. You know, this can be another form of design that can be, you know, towards, as you said, one specific result, or can be also a tool for exploration, like you just said, can be more open, you know. So the optimization can be also something that can generate something unpredictable, you know. And you made the point, I mean, it's absolutely interesting, your answer. So I will move to the other, if you want. And the third question is, one of the main characteristics of wearable technology is its ability to incorporate electronics in order to generate different structures of data. In this regard, which is the role of data in your production, and which is the role of data?
Which is, sorry?
Which is the potential of data?
Okay, right. Yeah, okay. I'm constantly...
In the design process,
Yeah. I am constantly dealing with the data structure in the design processes. Extracting, articulating, and distributing information out of that data is let's say, the constant preoccupation of my daily work. Let's make a distinction between data and information. Information is the part of the data which is relevant in a specific context. So not all the data can become information, but you have nonetheless always a huge amount of data which is exchanged between a system and the other. If we take as a premise that we are system within a larger ecology, and we can always read this in multi-scalar level, which means we can go into our systems and see the various components, how to exchange the data among themselves, or outside the system in a larger scale and see how system is really just a part of a larger ecology. If we accept this fractal setup for mereology, which is the relation between the parts and the whole, we see that there is a constant data exchange between system and subsystems and larger ecologies of systems. It is true even if you consider yourself as a biological system. We already are information processing machines, extremely sophisticated ones at that. If anything, data and embedded electronics should be seen as a way of extending our senses and thus reshape our information ecology. There's a long road ahead in that. We are just scratching the surface and barely, let's say, at the baby steps, at the beginner baby steps of that. To make you one example from science fiction, but it's very poignant in my opinion. There's a book by Charles Stross, which is called Accelerando, in which the author speaks about metacortex, which is a cloud of organized information that is symbiotic with the brain of one of the main characters. And there are information agents, which means programs capable of autonomous decisions, which can scan the information cloud and organize chunks of news and data and other information in a more articulated way, and then just separate autonomously what is junk from what is relevant for the main character. And in this, let's say, they become more and more sophisticated up to the point that you can let's say, send out copies of yourself to speak with other copies of other people, which is a very interesting, very interesting situation at some point. So I think that the way in which things will evolve, it's totally open-ended, but it will certainly go in the way of more complexity and more sophistication in the way we deal with our information ecology, and we make it part not only of something that is external, but the way it reshapes the way we consider how humanity and ourselves. Now, maybe I've gone too far in that, probably, but this is the, let's say, the long distant thought I have about this. In the, let's say, in the more close future, but I think that future I described is not very far. In the closer future, we will assist to probably to the birth of the metacortex in the next year. That is what, in my mind, is behind the corner, just waiting for us in a few years, probably.
I'm looking forward for it. So, good.
The book is highly suggested, by the way.
I'm writing all the books that you said. I'm gonna put the direct link to the books in the documentation of the interview, and thank you for that. So the last question that was prepared is this one. One of the biggest challenges of RESHAPE is the relation between the restricted rules and the freedom every researcher needs to succeed in his task. Is it possible to merge and balance these two realities, translating those differences in an added value?
I am not a market expert, really, so I wish I could answer this question and address this.
I want you to talk more
properly. No, I have an answer. I have an answer that doesn't end here, of course. So no, I wish I could address maybe the topic properly, but from my point of view, I can say this: the market and anti-market economies, as Manuel de Landa defines them, are already relating and dynamically balancing themselves throughout economy scales, triggering each other in a cascade of effects, which means the evolution of a market can lead to the birth of an anti-market entity, and the decision of an anti-market entity can trigger a new market economy that didn't exist before. I would like to spend a few words about freedom and about balance, because there are two very big concepts that the questions is touching. And freedom might be a little misplaced as a word here. Let's say there is the need for unbiased research, and I desperately advocate unbiased research. I mean, the kind of research that can lead to a Razzie Award, for instance. The Razzie Awards, for who doesn't know them, are the award that are given for the most useless paper or research published during the year. But also, this is the same kind of research that, since it thinks outside the given schemes and the given, let's say, definition of rationality, is able to produce real scientific breakthroughs. It's not uncommon in the case of a scientist who wins a Razzie Award one year and then it's prized with the Nobel the year after or a few years after for something that came from the same research that gave him the Razzie Award. But in order to do that, you have to get resources, and sometimes market economies can go only so far in this, while anti-market entities can have access to greater economic resources because they tend to accumulate resources, and are the only subjects sometimes that are able to give a research team the access to certain assets. So, for instance, I don't see very successful a crowdsourcing campaign for the Large Hadron Collider, for instance, or a lab for the kind of research that Craig Ventner is doing. Of course, it is very important to to have the way of crowdsourcing certain ideas to spark certain kind of innovation, because there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of speed in that. But sometimes, in order to go to the next level or to break some barriers, you need the quantity. You need the quantity that makes quality, and I mean resources, I mean money, I mean assets. Without them, you only get stuck at level 0 or at level 1. And on the other hand, balance should understood as dynamic, as an heterogeneous flux of resources, not a flattening perspective. There should always be the opportunity of gathering and concentrating resources as well, and it is very important as well, as the capacity to disrupt and redistribute them at some point. So, for instance, there are in some discussions people who see Formula One as a waste of money, while for me it is a great research environment and an opportunity. Research is continually facing uncertainties, and intention, or by which one goes with the premises, rarely match the usefulness of the result. It's something that it is born with a well-intended spirit or a well-intended, let's say, wit of the moment. It doesn't mean it will automatically produce something useful. You don't really know where something useful will come from. For instance, speaking about Formula One, there is a system to prevent heartache in newborn babies that was derived from Formula One data monitoring system directly. So you really don't know where good ideas come from, to quote Stephen Johnson. The important thing is that only in certain circumstances you have the chance to explore certain kind of constraints or certain kind of situation that spark the need of certain problem solving that you get only in those situations. But the solution to those problems can have a repercussion, a very positive repercussion to the improvement or the change of daily life, daily problems.
It was the delay that I was telling you before. I mean, yeah, more or less, your vision is very similar to the one of Kadushino before. You see, you know, the freedom of the researcher not so connected, you know, or to the market. But you know, I was trying to understand then where is innovation coming from, and why with this Formula One example. No, you basically don't know from where those from where innovation is coming, or how people is gonna use innovation. From the example of Formula One was good in this case, but you know, since we are here in the office, we are also coordinating the Pavilion of Innovation 2015. A lot of innovation is coming now from education, you know, and there is a growing attention also of the market around all the students, all the academies. So basically, I start to see a stronger connection between the ability of the market to also read the product and the result of research, and try to embed all these, let's say, added value, all these values in their own products, in the product that the market itself is producing. So I just, the point, it was more on, you know, on this, let's say, on this growing connection between the research and the result of free research, and then the ability of this research to become an innovation on the market afterwards, you know. Mm-hmm. I see something like with digital fabrication, the connection start to be is quite more strong before, you know, the ability of people to do prototypes and test their own ideas, You know, it's something that before was not that simple. And prepare and have a product that can be more mature, also to be proposed after a longer process into the market.
Oh yeah, I mean, just to go by with the same kind of thinking I was trying to say before. In this case, okay, you have a distributed technology, which is 3D printed. That is a very good thing because it gives more democratic access to that. But it's not just the technology, and I mean, it takes away one more constraint between the design of ideas and the realization of ideas at a certain level, which means that at some point you have to make there will be a distinction. There will be, let's say, a filter to take out who really is a designer in that sense, who just tinkers and makes Yoda hats, for instance. On the other hand, the distributed technology that goes on the market is one thing, and the technology that is accessible for all kind of resources will have a different, let's say, access point in terms of economies, and this difference will always be like that because it's a moving target. The moment a technology becomes more economic, it means that the research has moved into something else, and there is a way of making a more a cheaper version that is distributable, or improved version. But research, there are several kinds of research. One is the unbiased research that it taps into the, let's say, the borderlines even of reality at some point. One is the research that it's trying to make things go out of the lab and into production, and there's a lot of road there. It's not as simple as saying it. Maybe it's one of the most difficult and compelling part of research, which means transforming lab research into applied research and applied research into production. There's a lot of work going there, and a lot of time spent there. So the moment we see a technology entering the market, it means that the research is already into the next step, probably. So there will always be, even if it will reduce in the future the gap, there will always be this sort of gap, because there is necessarily a time involved for development, and this is something that you cannot shrink to zero, because it requires a lot of work. You don't know in advance. You cannot figure out in advance how to make something marketable from an invention or from a discovery. It takes a lot of time to test it and to put it to use, to see, sometimes to find function and uses for something you discover. Most of the time, the invention it's the catalyzer of necessities rather than the other way around. And there will always be different, let's say, different needs, different subjects that are tackling the same basic technology, but into different level of sophistication according to the thing they have to do. I mean, large design companies might want to test very big pieces for something. A designer might want to access to something that is smaller because it is the kind of economies he can deal with. When this shift, when this, let's say, access point in terms of economic will shift, we will assist into a shift in terms of what will be the next step that increases quality and complexity, but the gap will always be there.
Yeah, is what to comment this this thing that you said is something that we also experienced after the first competition of RESHAPE. You know, we were doing this competition, receiving a lot of projects, But you know, after you do something, and even if it's digitally fabricated and went through a process of 3D printing, laser cutting, or production, let's say, that doesn't mean that the product is ready for the market at all. You have to go through a completely different process that is way more complex. You have to think also in another way, you know, not only as a designer, but you have to look also to other assets you said before, economically as well, and other forms of development of the idea itself. So, Alessio, thank you. I mean, it was very, very interesting, the interview, and I'm more happy. I was already happy to have you, and now I'm happier to have you as a member of the jury. And we are looking forward to see you in Barcelona for this workshop of RESHAPE.
Yeah, okay, just one thing. Let me thank you for the questions. I get not many questions, not many interviews, but I have to say these were one of the most interesting questions that I read and I had to answer. So thank you for that, because they were very stimulating.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy about it. So, thank you, Alessio. Bye, and again, thank you for being in the RESHAPE competition. Bye, Alessio.
Bye, Aldo. Bye, everybody.
Bye.